Hi, and welcome to this mix of poetry and prose honoring Mother Earth and the original meaning of Mother's Day, which was conceived by social activist Julia Ward Howe. In 1870, she wrote the Mother's Day Proclamation for Peace, which she asserted that humans and the earth together were crying out for peace. Reverend Sarah Pirtle, the minister of the village church in Cummington, Mass., where Howe spoke in 1881, will read her Mother's Day proclamation.
Arise, then, women of this day. Arise, all women who have hearts, whether our baptism be that of water or of tears. Say firmly, we will not have great questions decided by irrelevant agencies. Our husbands shall not come to us reeking with carnage for caresses and applause. Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, of mercy, and patience. We women of one country will be too tender of those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs. From the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own. It says, disarm, disarm. The sword of murder is not the balance of justice. Blood does not wipe out dishonor, nor violence vindicate possession. As men have often forsaken the plow and the anvil at the summons of war, let women now leave all that may be left of home for a great and earnest day of counsel. Let them meet first as women to bewail and commemorate the dead. Let them then solemnly take counsel with each other as to the means whereby the great human family can live in peace, each bearing after his own kind the sacred impress, not of Caesar, but of God. In the name of womanhood and of humanity, I earnestly ask that a general Congress of women without limit of nationality may be appointed and held at some place deemed most convenient and at the earliest period consistent with its objects, to promote the alliance of the different nationalities, the amicable settlement of international questions, the great and general interests of peace.
Thank you, Sarah. Our presentation is offered in line with this vision of humans and the rest of nature honoring Mother Earth and with hopeful intentions for peace. I'm your host, Elise McLaughlin, speaking to you from Northfield, Massachusetts, Squakeag, territory of the Abenaki, whom we thank for having co-created with this land and river for thousands of years, and whose continued presence in this place benefits all beings who live here. We have 5 wonderful women writers speaking today. If you would like to turn the closed captioning on or off, it is either under CC, or if there's no CC at the bottom of your Zoom screen, it should be under the ... menu. Our first poet is Kristen Lee, who will be reading her haiku woven in small pieces throughout the presentation. Please welcome haiku poet Kristen Lee.
Thank you, Lise. My name is Kristen Lee, and I am zooming in to you from Southern Connecticut. I am on the traditional tribal Quinnipiac land, which I'm sure you might recognize as the home to the university. So there will be references to both the Quinnipiac tribe, specifically one of the deities, Habamak, which we now know is the sleeping giant mountain range where Quinnipiac University is. And this is what I see when I look out my window. So these haiku, this first set I'll be reading are observations from when I walk through Sleeping Giant Forest. And I'm going to read each poem twice. And I hope you enjoy them. Patience as weapon. Venus flytrap, soft palate birth for fungus gnat. Patience as weapon. Venus flytrap, soft palate birth for fungus gnat. Clover on the tongue, one-eyed jackrabbit, still as glass, descries me here. Clover on the tongue, one-eyed jackrabbit, still as glass, descries me here. Blue seeking iris, hem of ruffled petals, cream inveigles keen bees. Blue seeking iris, hem of ruffled petals, cream inveigles keen bees. Rooted beneath crown shyness, sky breaks favor in sharing time, space. Rooted beneath crown shyness, sky breaks favor in sharing time, space. Striations of clouds, puffs of sky feathers crimp the barrel atmosphere. Striations of clouds, puffs of sky feathers crimp the barrel atmosphere. Murmuration of starlings levens, shatters, a milk sky bird ballet. Murmuration of starlings levens, shatters, a milk sky bird ballet. Symphonic insects, ribbing gyro-clicks, stacking crotchets and quavers. Symphonic insects, ribbing gyro-clicks, stacking crotchets and quavers. Dandelions burst into filaments of seed, active galaxies. Dandelions burst into filaments of seed, active galaxies. Dogwood blossoms pirouette from the trap rock scarp of Habamak's hip. Dogwood blossoms pirouette from the trap rock scarp of Habamak's hip. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. She will be back to share more haiku throughout the presentation. Our next reader is poet and memoirist Cheryl Savageau.
Hi, I'm coming to you from south of Boston, which is on the traditional homeland of the Wampanoag people who have lived here in eastern Massachusetts for the past 15,000 years. I'm going to be reading mostly poems I wrote about my mother. They are written from her jewelry that came to me after she passed, the oldest daughter, and they sort of came to me before we passed them around to other people. So this one is Garnet. This is the mother's heart, the deepest red. This is where roses grow in greatest profusion, each one covering a thorn, red roses of blood, white roses of milk. This is the heart of sorrow, of birth and sustenance, and loss of blood that has been shed over and over again. This is the mother's heart, the garden of transformation, where she will give birth one more time and know herself as love. And this is called First Diamond, and it was my mother's diamond, first diamond ring from their engagement. It was tiny. It was like a quarter carat diamond. And I knew nothing about diamonds, so I had to go online and for all of these and look up all this stuff about gemstones because I had no idea. But apparently diamonds are so thick that they actually measurably slow down light. This is called the first diamond. This is the place where time slows down, where light is collected and flashes in all the colors of love. It is the eternal place where she meets him in the heat of desire and the pressure of clasped bodies. Here, they turn the opaque dark into radiant seed. This one is called Amber Necklace, and it actually makes a tree. I'm going to show you, like I'm a first grade teacher here. It makes a tree on the page. Inspired by ants, I tasted the sap that oozed in great drops from the bark of the pine. It tasted like its needles smelled, like winter, like mountains or early morning. Too strong for more than just a taste, too sticky to roll into the ball I wanted to carry in my hands like a golden marble. I worried for the tree. Was it hurt? I asked. No, just leaking, my father told me. It's made so much extra food. He told me how, even in deepest winter, you will not starve in a pine grove, how there is always food within, how the sweet globules turned over millions of years, hard as stone, how the insects were caught inside, preserved forever. It is not the insects I want, but the sweetness they signify. I am caught in the sweet amber of my mother's hair, nourished by the light and dark of her. Yes, and the sticky, the too hard to manage, the I can't get it off my hands. I want it now, those moments of petrified love, where we first find ourselves caught before we know what will preserve us. Emerald. Here is the woman of the woods, the green woman, who makes things grow. She is not as easy as you think. She has her rules. Break them at your peril. Make her angry and she will make a world more barren than ice. Let her be and she will cover you with green. So I want to intersperse some of these poems with some stories about my mother. This one's called Mendel's Milkman. And my father is Abenaki, my mother is French. This is a story called Mendel's Milkman. We are all in the car with our various colored hair. Me, a bottle blonde this first year of high school. My sister, brunette. One brother, red-haired, and the two babies, different shades of brown. When two nuns come running over for a ride to the dentist. It is our first year of Catholic schools, and nuns are still a novelty. They climb into the car, and maybe overwhelmed by sheer numbers, exclaim, "My, your children all look so different." They do not know my father, black-haired, hazel-eyed, nor apparently the wily ways of genetics. I roll my eyes, having already heard of Mendel, and how a great-grandfather's eyes can lay hidden for generations, then flash in a newborn's face, the incongruity of blondes with dark skin. And I know how the ancestors come back. My mother just raises her eyebrows, turns the wheel and steps on the gas, and without missing a beat says, "Different milkmen, sisters, different milkmen." Peridot. I am, by the way, wearing a ton of my mother's jewelry today, and I don't usually wear very much jewelry, so I'm going to show you this. Can you see this? I don't even know. So this is the Peridot. This is I didn't even know the name of this until this jewelry came to me. So this is it. It's a pear-shaped stone, the one I have. Peridot. It is a pear or a green drop of dew glittering in cold morning sun. I'm sorry. Let me start that again. It is a pear or a green drop of dew glittering in cold morning sun. It is the tender green with the strength to crack boulders. It is the far-seeing green. It is sunlight in a leafy glade. Little green, the first leaf buds, shoots in snow water. This is the color the dead see from within the cauldron when they are stirred into new life. The stone is biaxial. It cleaves in two, like my mother and myself. Tradition. My mother is making apple pie and I am helping. I am placing the cut slices into the pie, following her directions, placing the half moons curved side up along the outer rims, arranging crescents and circles from the outside to the center, flat against the bottom. I cut slices evenly, arrange them in perfect tiers, leave as little space between them as I can manage, till they mound over the top like a gentle hill or the belly of a woman. I can feel her eyes over my shoulder watching that I do it right, that I've mixed the cinnamon into the sugar until it's an even brown, that I've done this before, not after slicing the apples, that I pour it over them in a gently curving spiral as she's shown me. This is the way it is done. 20 years later, I am helping her again, placing the cut apples just so, not thinking why, secure in knowing the right way, when she glances over and asks, "Why are you doing it like that?" I look at the half moons running along the outside crust. We've always done it this way, haven't we? She looks at me like I'm crazy. It's the way you showed me, I say. I always do it this way. Really, she says, and without ceremony dumps the apples into the shell, spreads them in a heap with her hands, mixes the cinnamon with the sugar and pours it over the pie. She picks up the pie plate and shakes it gently so the sugar settles. I imagine the edges pressed just so around her thumb, the central steam hole, the knife-slashed arrows, the painting of every nook and cranny. That's the thing with tradition. Even now, peeling apples for pie, I'm looking over my own shoulder, wondering. Dressing up. Who says red hairs can't wear purple, my mother said, pulling another lavender sweater over her head. Do you think it's too flamboyant? She'd ask with a giggle and lifted eyebrow. I never knew how she wanted me to answer that, this fur blend 50s sweater girl whose neckline never dipped below her collarbone, who wore high heels or sneakers, nothing in between, who sneered at cabled sweaters and tweed skirts. No French woman would be caught dead in those clothes, she'd announce as she sat at the kitchen table, where she rolled her hair over the rat-tailed comb while babies crawled around her feet. She wore sequins to the weekly dances, beaded sweaters bowling, and finally, for my son's wedding, I gave in and wore a dress of black and silver, sequins and beads. We shopped together for that day and everything was on sale. I won't tell you where, but it was not Newberry Street. When I listened to her and bought the dress and a drapey velvet jacket, we never broke $100. These are the gifts we don't expect, the things we learn only later not to scorn, the working class elegance, the unabashed love of adornment and color, and yes, these frail and beautiful bodies our spirits come wearing. Pink ice with marcasite. So that's this one. And the great thing with my mother is that she loved the jewelry. It didn't matter if it was like this great ring that my father in their later years was able to buy her, or if it was something just caught her eye in like Kmart. So when when I was going through her stones, I, of course, who knew nothing about them, I had to go to a jeweler and say, is this, tell me what is real. And this one, which I love so much, was not real. And some of the ones that I thought weren't real, were. So it was this, weird thing. And she kept them like in all the rooms of the house. She had these little tiny bowls. So because she was very busy, she was a gardener. She did all this kind of stuff. She was a cash manager. She became a cash manager at a Fortune 500 company when she was in her 50s. So anyway, these little bowls of jewels like were on the windowsills and everything. So anyway, pink ice with marcasite. It is saddle shaped with the stone huge and oval. It is the reflection of the Taj Mahal with reflecting pool at sunset. It is two turbaned fortune tellers over a glowing ball, a spider spinning, its body faceted pink, its legs covered with dew. It is two women dancing, carrying between them a drum, a pink moon, a light bigger than both of them. Figure 8. I grew up on a lake, so we did a lot of ice skating. Figure 8. I remember when you showed me how to step into infinity, how to follow the thin line as if our two tracks were one. I traveled it over and over, widening that thread to a broad road. I want to believe that everything circles back round into double curves, that when I set my foot, the ice will be lit with faint tracings. Aquamarine. This is the sweet color of home, the robes and nightgowns my mother wore, the color she painted the house she and my father built. This stone, the color of sea, holds the scent of her after dancing, her perfume on the night air stronger than cedar when I open the chest. Aquamarine, it is the color of ecstatic light, the color of something like joy. And I'd like to read a few poems, or a couple of poems about being a grandmother. I know that when I was a young woman in the 70s, feminist, I thought, what's the most important thing I can do? And part of that was raise a good son. And I'm happy to say that I have raised a good man. And now I have two grandsons who are also growing into good men. But this is when my grandson was quite young. This week, he notices me eating, holds his neck straighter, bangs the table with a spoon. This week, he is trying out vowels. Ow, I. This week, he grunts, raises his eyebrows, sings with the Beatles tape. This week, he watches the cat bathe herself, is afraid of faucets and sudden noises. Now he is eating his toes, chuckling out loud, pulling my hair. This week, he discovers gravity, drops toys off his tray, watches them fall, climbs me like a tree. And this is a found poem. It's a love poem from my grandson, age 2. Meme, you are as big as a truck. Your teeth are like tigers. And I'd like to end with this poem called The Mixer. For Christmas, she gives me a mixer. It's a super duper model that has, besides the large and small bowls, attachments for making sausage, dough hooks, and 2 different containers for chopping veggies. What's wrong with her? Doesn't she know I can't cook anymore? What am I supposed to do with this? I am overwhelmed with the enormity of what I can't do, and I'm furious at her for this reminder. She has always done things like this. She buys me things she wants for herself, a canary yellow knit sleeveless top with ruffles made of some stiff synthetic that feels like chewed plastic. She buys me red coats because she can't wear red. She buys me business suits when I only wear jeans and t-shirts. This is just one more useless gift. Why am I disappointed? Will she ever know who I am? My husband puts the gifts in the car, carries the box into the kitchen, where it sits on the table for more than a week. Finally, I open it, take out the pieces, and read the booklet. I can chop onions with this, and celery and carrots, and make a soup. I can mash potatoes and squash. I can whip cream. I can make banana bread. I can make cookies. I can grind meat and make chicken salad. It takes a while, but little by little, I take back some of what I've lost. I am an ungrateful daughter. My mother has given me back my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. That was great. Next, we have Kristen Lee to give us some more little gems of haiku.
Thank you, Lise. Thank you, Cheryl. Those are beautiful. This next set of poems, so I just want to mention that the collection I'm reading from is part of an exercise I started at the beginning of the pandemic last year, in which I challenged myself to write a haiku a day. So this next selection is a series of haiku that were written from inside as I was observing the world through the window over time. Through the winter. And there is one poem here that references the SpaceX launch from last June. You might recognize the drone name when that comes up. And there's another poem that is an ekphrasis poem that is in response to Eileen Hogan's gardenscapes, and she's a British landscape painter. She's been painting the same public gardens in London for decades, and she had an exhibit here at Yale and was able to see that before the pandemic came and sent us all home. And then she so kindly zoomed in and hosted a beautiful lecture about her work at the beginning of the pandemic. And once again, there will be references to Quinnipiac University. Raindrops fleck on bluing glass, mouth respires a fog into the cool morn. Raindrops fleck on bluing glass, mouth respires a fog into the cool morn. The giant whispers from his slumber, this is the margin of error. The giant whispers from his slumber, this is the margin of error. Of course I still love you, into Ursa's lights, both major and minor. Of course I still love you, into Ursa's lights, both major and minor. Orange marble orb weaver, web blooming between potted petunias. Spins in relief to aerial bouquets of stars winking behind her. Orange marble orb weaver, web blooming between potted petunias, spins in relief to aerial bouquets of stars winking behind her. Eileen Hogan's garden sprinkler, hiccups, spraying droplets of silver, greens the gallery with the oils of her personal geographies. Eileen Hogan's garden sprinkler, hiccups, spraying droplets of silver, greens the gallery with the oils of her personal geographies. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. That was beautiful. Our next reader is poet Susan Glass. And Susan, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Yes, beautiful.
Thank you so much. And what an honor it is to read with all of you and to be together in this spirit of peace. I'm coming to you from the Santa Clara Valley in California, which is Ohlone land and has been so for 15,000 years. And some, I am happy to say, are still with us, which is wonderful. I want to honor two mothers today. My biological mother, Flora Louise Duffy Bailey, who loved the earth and all nature, especially birds and plants, and who made sure that I, as her blind daughter, listened and smelled and felt and tasted and sang and took to heart all of Earth's gifts. I will alternate between reading poems about her and poems about Mother Earth in her various manifestations. Many of these poems appear in my forthcoming chapbook, The Wild Language of Deer, which will be published by Slate Roof Press in Western Massachusetts later this year, later this summer, I should say. The first poem is called June Bedtime Story. In the wild light before cataracts, God was marigold seed sprouting from between mother's fingers. My first nursery to water and smell. Together we tamped the earth, our forearms and knees touching. She stood and I, child God, at ear level with patchwork knees, listened to a wheelbarrow on stone, pulled by mother hands, earth gloved and honest. The flapping burlap apron of mother lap and snips and trowel. God became dwarf plants and plastic six-packs and spiderweb roots clinging. And the seedlings begot evening, smelling of onions. I crouched in the basin our knees had made, unsure how seed graves could spawn life, afraid of leaving them to their dark work, afraid of running away. This poem is called Listening Blind to a Buick's Wren. His melody is symmetrical, practiced. La 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 la, Siebert. He lilts from an oleander bush, rests 3 measures, then la 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 la, Siebert. His tail must be conducting, a black barred, white-tipped baton curved over his back and flicking side to side. Does his tail drive his music, or the music his tail? Halfway through my steaming coffee, he changes tunes. Ta ta ta, ti 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 ti, tri. As though juggling mistletoe berries till their speed becomes a trill. Ta ta ta, ti ti ti, tri. The trails bounce through toyon shrubs, so I turn my head to follow. Cha, 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 cha. His scolding, his wife's. Cha, cha, zzz. His calls pounce in a tangle of leaves and twigs. I imagine his upward curving bill snatching a beetle, swallowing it whole, then borrowing a sycamore leaf napkin. Silence. And now, from much farther off, shwee, shwee, shwee. The same wren or another. In my next life, I want to be his bold white eyebrows and his ventriloquism. These next 2 poems are for grandmothers. And the first is for my 2 biological grandmothers in the human tree. And the second is for a distant relative in DNA. And I'll explain that when we come to it. Toledo beginnings. Kitchens where bottom cupboard drawers are for children only, where balled twine and tea sets and rubber blocks live, where metal cake pans clang like cymbals, where skillet onions rubbed by a wooden spoon hiss on and on. Kitchens where Sunday yeast rolls are always rising and Yorkshire pudding bubbling and roast beef greasing, where grandmothers, determined and demure, trade rolling pins, oilcloths, stories. In one, they made kielbasa, in another, pfeffernuss. For 14 years, the Pfeffernuss and the kielbasa didn't meet. The daughters in Pfeffernuss sang and played piano. Kielbasa's son attended navigator school, mailed letters on trade winds, married the youngest Pfeffernuss. They lifted their old kitchens on their backs and crossed the prairie to a new savoring where nightly grandmothers pinched cumin and cinnamon into their sleep. So we moved from Michigan to California when I was about 5 years old, and we moved into this valley in a part where there were many orchards and many oak trees and eucalyptus groves and a certain wildness. And I was kind of a strange kid. I kept inventing my own science and my own theology. For instance, I thought that the sun came up in the morning because the crows and the swallows called for it. And I was pretty sure that the Vesper robins and the mourning doves were the ones guiding it back home in the evening. And when I first got stung by a bee, I told someone that a flower bit me. And so it wasn't surprising that I thought the 4 oak trees on our property were somehow my ancestors. So this was for the grandmother oak tree. Grandmother, you claimed the back hill before fences, patios, paths, so we made you an altar there. Railroad tie steps guiding our feet, your children and rosemary sprouting around you, tumbled sharp leaves for bare heels to catch, prickly corns, and always a summer toad napping beneath a log. At first, I thought your branches were saying, "Brackada, brackada, brackada," until I learned there were acorn woodpeckers roosting, and you, their granary, granary, granary tree. One January night, you gathered all of California's wind into your roaring hair. I climbed your hair and wrapped my arms around your girth as far as they would reach. My hands didn't touch. I rested my cheek on your rough skirt. Your windy voice swelled, and your still body anchored me. And now we returned to my mother. This is called sanding the picnic tables. We did so many things together: birding, tandem bicycling, sewing clothes, sanding things, baking, sanding the picnic tables. 2-decade-old picnic tables lean, wood-warped together, their skins peeling. These bright, hot mornings, I want to use my hands to feel them blister and bloom. Mama knows I'm her child. She brings sandpaper, a currycomb's rough tongue, full of sneeze scent. Her hands guiding mine, we sand table surfaces, benches, our heads bent close, our ears catching the rasp. It is work that salts wrists and forearms and shoulders. Sometimes the paper slips and wood slivers lodge in a palm's lifeline or a fingernail's quick. This labor carries risks. Our palms grow hot. Upper arm muscles throb. I want to stop. She says, not yet. Swallows squeak in the pussy willow tree. Mint and lemon balm whisper, tea. I ask how many mornings and afternoons this work I thought I wanted will steal. She says, as many as needed until it's done. I love deserts, and we have some wonderful ones here. They are both stern and gracious. Fainting in the Mojave. April and the hard scent of creosote sears lungs. Can the running skinks smell it, or the cactus wren stuttering his broken motor song? Our birding class has come here for him, for Gamble's quail and loggerhead shrike and roadrunner. I haven't counted on my body's innocence. My dizzying nausea that buckles my legs like a colt's drops me face down in the black brush and greasewood. The black-chinned sparrow nests in a barrel cactus, and only now, pressed belly flat as a rattlesnake and cooled by my classmates' shadows, do I hear him, a message folded among spines. Red shafted flicker. We startle each other on a path in mid-stanza where I'm scuffing through sycamore leaves and thinking, ankle, acorn. The flicker has been hammering for ants or beetles. Phew, it calls, voice sharp as an egg tooth. It flaps, glides, flashes unabashed its red underwings and tail. How large it is. He or she, can I know in October? Her spanned wings carry us into stanza 2, where she lands on a quivering scrub oak tightrope and again calls, Pum! Wika, wika, wika in April means one male yelling at his neighbor, but Pum, a message for me. Don't disturb my anting. Your feet are loud. Here we are in stanza 3. She's quiet. I'm thinking she won't climb the live oak's vertical slope as her cousins, the hairy and acorn woodpeckers will, leaning against their tails while they drill and stash seeds. She works her magic in the leafy cavities where larvae live. By stanza 4, when she disappears, not for the night, I think, but for me, I ask myself what to do with the space she's left, her absent, scuffling claws. And I will close with this poem. When I was 20, my mother and I were in Toledo visiting the family, and we took a walk one day along the Maumee River and had this conversation. Crossing. That afternoon, we inched on shaky logs across the Maumee River, the water roiling and the air swooning with late summer gnats. I'd have been a botanist, she confided. Words like horticulture and mulch, they kept me up at night. The way loam rolled off my tongue. I dreamed of opening a flower shop, but that meant botany school my father couldn't afford. I married your father. Her words, no more dangerous than the barbs on the pineapple mint vines, clutching at shirts and pants. Still, I was careful. What else? I asked. Swanland, England. I wrote to a girl there after the start of the war. We never met. She stopped short. There was more, of course. Her jazz singing bent over the ironing board, her year upon year purchases, new trousers and dresses for 3 growing children, as her provider, our father, clenched checkbook and credit. What else didn't I know? No wonder she loved the smaller risks, riding in starlit open truck beds, driving the roads with no trespassing signs, buying the apricots not on the grocery list. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. That was great. And now our haiku poet, Kristen Lee.
Thank you, Elise. Susan, your poems are so joyful. I really appreciated the musicality of your poetry. Thank you. And this final set of poems, these are observations from walking on a shoreline town called Stony Creek in Branford, Connecticut, which I mentioned earlier is the land of the Totoket tribe. And Stony Creek, when it was colonized, was deeply quarried out. It has an unusual pink stone. And you will recognize this stone. It was quarried out deeply, and most of this stone was used to build a lot of places in New York City. And for example, the base of the Statue of Liberty is made from this stone. And in addition to writing about the environment, I also write a lot of train poems. So there is one train poem in this set. And something else you should know, there's a legal term called wharfing out, and this came to pass in the early 2000s. Wharfing out is when a person buys shoreline property, and even though the shore itself is supposed to be common land, if the property owner, if they can extend their wharf legally as far out as they'd like, and in doing so, they then make the shoreline undesirable for other people to go and enjoy. So wharfing out shows up here. And I just want to mention that this final set of poems is for Larry. Acela glides, cuts the Atlantic landscape, Saybrook to Back Bay Express. Acela glides, cuts the Atlantic landscape, Saybrook to Back Bay Express. The outboard chokes noxious fumes, conjuring an apparition of gulls. The outboard chokes noxious fumes, conjuring an apparition of gulls. Brackish waters burp from whaler's stern, morning crisp as an unripe pear. Brackish waters burp from whaler's stern, morning crisp as an unripe pear. Jagged pink stone dazzles, mirrors white sunlight like swords on the water. Jagged pink stone dazzles, mirrors the white sunlight like swords on the water. Gas, oil, slick the fish-like opaline surface of kelp-entangled tide pools. Gas, oil, slick the fish-like opaline surface of kelp-entangled tide pools. Sluggish neeps, barely touching, hardly enough, make skittish the shore crab. Sluggish neeps, barely touching, hardly enough, make skittish the shore crab. The rumbling hunger of wharfing out, gulping at the horizon. The rumbling hunger of wharfing out, gulping at the horizon. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. That was beautiful. Our next reader is poet Dina Stander.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dina, and I'm reading today from Nipmuc and Pecumtuck lands in Shutesbury, Massachusetts. And I have some prose and some poems, and then a little more prose. First piece is called Turning Soil. My friend B died from cancer on a painfully sweet May morning, the day before Mother's Day. My calendar said full moon, and I smiled in spite of the ache. How like her to go when the tides are pulling us towards light, a morning full of new leaves, bird song, and a slow rain. I have a favorite Technicolor memory of B from another May morning. Typically audacious, she wore white in her garden, a floppy hat, long sleeves, pants tucked into socks, her muscled arms thrusting a spade deep. She looked like a vital spring goddess turning soil, trees and flower, and the sun shining a glory around her body. Her absolute desire to get dirty was so delicious that I drove by waving madly out the window. She had survived the winter of her first bout with cancer. Adult friendships between women busy raising children is whole cloth woven from interrupted conversations sewn together with the thread of goodwill over a continuum of years. We were coming to some especially interesting patterns in the cloth when death interrupted my conversation with B. Once, while I rubbed her hands warm during a hospital visit, relating tribulations with my kids, she gently admonished me to just go home and love them up, hold them closer more often. Following this advice was not always easy, but it usually worked best. It was a simple lesson in redemption, a gift from a mother who loved fiercely and wanted so much to stay. Another time I visited after a bad night. The nurses had moved her next to a window and we sat looking out together. Everything was bare, flat hospital rooftops and April's naked branches. Early spring is a hard time for hope in New England because winter holds on so tight. I read to her for a while, then massaged her feet in their wildly colored socks. In a hospital Johnny, hooked up to IV fluids and pallor gray from chemotherapy, socks were how Bee reminded us of her soul and of our own. Bee was the kind of friend who reflects back for you the parts of yourself you don't necessarily appreciate enough or want to let show or have learned to hide. She saw me in a way that allowed for how intense I can be. She reminded me once that I couldn't help being this way. It was all part of the package. Her understanding gave me courage in a critical moment to go on being myself. It is this courage, which I still associate with her colorful socks, that I carry forward. I asked Bee once why she thought we incarnate, souls taking body to play out the inevitably painful human drama. She replied that it must be because living is such an interesting torrent of experience to feel, taste, touch, smell, hear, see, learn, make, and create, perchance to love. From the loneliness and sterility of a dying person's hospital bed, this insight gifted me with seeds I plant season after season while turning the soil of my inner garden, the one I tend to keep from feeling broken. On Mother's Day, I am blessed by the memory of my friend's fierce loving, reminded to sense everything, and especially to give thanks for the feel of my kids' arms around me and mine around them. This next poem is called Peeking In. Just now, through a surprise back door to the land of once, I caught a glimpse of us piled all around one another, me and my babies like cats on the couch napping in a ray of sun so bright none of us can open our eyes, which it turns out is a stroke of good luck because I'd have made eye contact with myself and blown a circuit in the time stream. And the very next thought, the one that almost stopped my heart, was wow. If it blows, then maybe I could stay, napping with my babies in a ray of sunshine there and once. So quick, I closed that door, embarrassed by how easily I might be seduced to go live an endless sunny afternoon entwined in the limbs of all that sweetness. This poem is called Gratitude for Simple Gifts. I return home and find a scallop shell on my desk that someone has placed just so, in order for me to notice the tiny, bleached, white skull of a mouse with a tooth still evident, and next to that the tiny front paw poised to run, and all of my being is flooded with gratitude for having daughters who see a thing of wonder and think to carry it home to me in the nest of a seashell so that I can know this wonder too. So much of what passes between parents and children is raw, even when we wish it didn't scrape us, it does. And so the certainty that I remembered in the thick of all that child rearing to pass along the capacity to recognize a small moment of wonder, to collect it gently, to carry it home, to have their wonder received whole. Given all the things that I forgot along the way, remembering this, I am most grateful for. This next piece is called In the Dream, 244 Walnut. In the dream, I woke from a nap on the couch. A curtain fluttered across the open window and the breeze carried the scent of orange blossoms and ocean. The kettle whistled on the stove and your voice followed. What kind of tea would I like, black or herbal? What kind of vessel, cup or mug, sugar or honey, front porch or kitchen table? So many binary choices, I said. Living or dead, you asked. And I woke up, alone, in the middle of the night. Thirsty for your company and some tea. Excuse me, that one gets to me sometimes. Those people we still would like to have tea with. Okay, so now I'm going to collect myself. That was a surprise. I'm going to swing towards the dark for a bit because the poems I've written this last year have a lot of dark in them. It's been a rough go being a poet in a world like ours. This is called Apocalypse Poem. Urban Dictionary, Paco Apocalypse. The slow death of the human race brought on by our own mass consumerist philosophies and underlying disgust for ourselves and one another. There will be an afterwards, a time when all of this and even the horrors to come will be over with, and human beings will dust themselves off and get on with surviving in a gentler circumstance. This is what I tell myself when I think of Fukushima and the poison leaking into the sea. This is what I tell myself when I walk on a beach littered with a plethora of small plastic pieces. There will be an afterwards, a time when America will come to terms with the brutality that feeds our inequities, the desperation of Puerto Rico, and the political Russian roulette practiced in Washington. This is what I tell myself when I need to believe we won't all be blown to smithereens by a maniac with an ego problem or bedlam spawned by the mother of all horrifier NATOs that has no connection to climate change. There will be an afterwards when we learn to ride the storms and mourn our losses and adapt to whatever new world awaits humanity. I tell myself this as if it would possibly convey comfort. Some days, the uncertainty we endure in the here and now makes me concerned my head will just pop. Like when the dog died and I worried I might have an aneurysm from trying so hard to understand loss. Afterwards, there will be a gentler circumstance, and even if it is always littered with small plastic pieces, our inequities and desperations notwithstanding, after we are blown to smithereens. We will even endure not understanding. We don't have to know how to survive. We just have to do it one breath at a time until there is no more air in the room, until there is no more time. I won't leave you there, I promise. This next poem is called "Oh Mercy," and it's about these nuns, the poor Clares, who wake up in the middle of the night, 2, 3 in the morning, and go to their sanctuary to pray for the people who are awake in the middle of the night and feeling despair. Oh mercy. The poor Clares rise in the wee hours, tread barefoot to the sanctuary, singing prayers into the night for the forlorn, the desolate, the weary. I lay in my bed at the same hour. I never learned to pray, never believed I might be heard. I think of the poor Clares, barefoot, singing, sacred. I hope their prayers are received. Oh, mercy. I hope they are answered. This next poem is called Shout. Sometimes I feel the weight of what is yet to come in the marrow of my bones like a dread, pinning my wings, stunning my thoughts, stilling my voice. Next breath tell myself, but not yet. So I shout into the wind the names of what I love, like tossing a boulder into the pond, where the ripples will continue to cross the waters of my time, so that the impression of what I love has a motion in the future where the ripple meets its shore. Sometimes I feel the weight of what is yet to come, and instead of pushing it off, I open my heart, hold it close, tenderly, with compassion, hoping our past can heal our future, meeting myself in the middle, eyes wide open, shouting the names of what I love into the wind with all my might. This was the last poem I wrote in 2020 on the 29th of December, and it's called Not Fucking Around. I harbor a concern that when I build a ritual fire for years end, setting transformational heat to what I want to leave behind, once that fire snags my rage, the whole of everything will burn to the ground, and I don't want to be some feel-better phoenix rising from the ash heap of this terrible year. Facing the dangers coming, I'm going to need the ancient, gnarly, not fucking around dragon, woken and hungry for justice. I'm going to need wings to fly. And this was the first poem I wrote in 2021. It's called 2020 from the Safety of 2021. This was the year I learned to hug with all my might, transcending space from a safe distance. This was the year I learned to cohabitate with worry that is ceaseless. This was the year I learned how much sorrow I can carry and still stand up. This was the year I learned how hard hate bites, even though I thought I already knew that, I didn't. This is the spring that rises gentle on the land, so gentle that I am reduced to standing in the yard weeping, from the worry which is not lifting, and from the relief that finds a way to my heart, like the sure song of phoebes calling between trees. Bird song and the flutter of wings, a remedy. This was the year I learned how dark the dark is. I am ready again to turn towards the light. And this poem is called Click Clack. Twice in the last few years while out walking, I've come upon animal bones working their way out of the soil. The first time I found 7 small mammalian vertebrae old enough to be growing mossy, scattered on a high ridge. The second time the earth returned the bleached remnants of a seabird's wing pushing up through trodden soil on a path near the ocean. I carried them all away home. They sit where I can toy with them, touch their purpose, wing, and spine. The other night I picked up 3 vertebrae, began to shake and tumble them in my cupped hand, listening to the click-clack of their relation to me. Looked at straight on, the vertebrae appear as delicate dragon heads that could breathe back to me the ghost fire of some animal's raw spinal impulse. We are, I think, made of the same stuff, bone and blood and the fire of intelligence, stone, water, atoms from stars. In the best stories, bones are knocked together by hags, gamblers, or old gods, all with the power to influence nations. Would that I could lay claim to being more than an ordinary lady. I've no hero in tow, no powers to bend world events or mend global weather. Maybe if I believed in some entity outside myself suitable to pray to beseech respectfully, to humbly implore, that wars be ended and victims healed, the land repaired, soldier souls mended. If that kind of believing were possible for me, then my prayer would be ceaseless. We are entering a cycle of great change on earth, a time to shelter the fires that burn in us. Our calls for justice may fall on deaf ears. Our thirsts may go unquenched. Life is full of these disappointments, and still we rise. From somewhere across the arc of the night sky, I hear again the click-clack of my relation to everything. The ache and awe of it makes me cry. And this last piece is called In the Circle of Our Arms, I Am Home. Mother's Day and social media is awash in pictures of moms living and gone with children tucked close in the circle of their arms. This soiree in the memory palace causes me to pause at windows in my mind. There is a place where I go in my body memory when I am wondering where I come from, to the circle of arms that nurtured my child self. And when I am wondering about the purpose of my life, I remember the children who have been celebrated and encouraged in the circle of my arms. And it is the circle of arms I melt into when I am embraced by old friends and we hold on to the hug longer than just hello, until we feel our hearts find their rhythm and the years apart slip away. It is the way I recover from bad dreams, curled under the arm of my sleeping husband. It is belonging to the people we belong to. And when I have had no people to belong to, wrapping my arms around myself in a hug has been the most reliable remedy. To be my own sheltering arms is a gift from the blessing of enough. It is a hard time to be an earthling, and there is no denying our social and climate predicaments. There are harder days ahead. I drink in the beauty of spring, the return of the annual riot of color. I sit outside in the morning with my eyes closed, listening for the brook, rambling, and the blue jays calling. I make an attempt to be in the moment, to breathe in the May blooming, so that somehow it might sustain me when the hurt of these days bends me low. I sit and wrap my arms around myself, imagining earth also held in my long embrace. Sometimes the circle includes all of creation. What I know, dear life, dear earth, dear mother, is that in the circle of our arms, I am home. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Dina, for those poignant words. Our next speaker will bring something yet different into the mix. Jane Caputi will read some prose and show graphics from her new book, Call Your Mother.
Thank you. And thanks, everybody. This has been so wonderful. And I will start by saying that I'm in Florida and near Boca Raton, and which occupies the homelands of the Tequesta and Seminole nations, who were, like many other groups, forcibly removed to Oklahoma over several decades in the early to mid 19th century. But a number of people escaped or hid and formed the tribe of the Seminole people in Florida today. Okay, next. Okay, so I'm going to be reading from this book, which I published last year in October, and it's called Call Your Mother, a deliberately dirty-minded manifesto for the Earth Mother in the Anthropocene. And I'm going to be reading from a chapter called Feed the Green. So next. And like many of us, I guess, I was in Massachusetts, in the Boston area. These are drawings illustrating the dream because I made a film in which I also told this dream. But the dream opens in the Boston metro area where I lived in the 1970s. And I'm rushing to get to the above ground T station, which is of course the Green Line for those of us who know the area. When I arrive, I spot a door that isn't usually there. Along with a few others, I enter and find a staircase, which we follow into a world beneath this one. There we find a train station and people, but they're not human. They are not too pleased to see us, having found humans to be unmannered. Though no one makes any move against us. I figure it best to make myself inconspicuous, so I get on a train and stay quiet and small. After some time, the train stops and several of us disembark into a sunbright and verdant countryside. We walk a short way and come upon a spring welling up from the ground. It's a flow of sparkling greenness. I dip my arm into the stream, feel a surge of energy, and withdrawing my arm, find it to now be all green and a glitter. The dreamscape then shifts abruptly, and I'm outside in New Mexico, where I also once lived. Standing alongside a friend, a Pueblo woman, I ask her, what does it mean? She points to an expanse where she's sowing seeds for 3 local grasses that birds love to eat. She looks at me and replies, feed the green. The feelings and perceptions that are communicated through a dream often impel the dreamer to act or change in some way. This one awakened in me a strong desire to find out all I could about greenness. Obviously, green is the color of the environmental movement and plant life, but what further spiritual meanings does green convey? Why did this green spring sparkle with its own internal fire? Why should we and how might we feed this green that so manifestly feeds us? Green, along with blue, often indistinguishably, is the color of water as well as vegetation. Photosynthesis was first achieved by cyanobacteria, who, along with billions of other microorganisms, actually do live in a world beneath this one. Plant photosynthesis is powered by green chlorophyll interacting with the radiant orange-yellow redness of the sun. The process, as science journalist Oliver Morton puts it, enables plants to, quote, eat the sun. Plants then become food for others, including us, who are in turn eaten and returned to the elements. Green plants imbibe fire and then give both fire and air. To be on good terms with life, we are obliged to return the favor, in essence, feeding the green. Morton writes that the green stands out among all colors because the greenness of life is so important and all-pervading that evolution has tuned our eyes to discriminate among its various hues more precisely than any other color, and so shaped our brains that we take solace in it. The green we know without thinking, he says, is good. But this is a complex goodness. Green, again, is the color of life, but it's also the color of slime, sickness, snot, vomit, decay, and death, all of which are grim. Still, a good death, not the premature, murderous, and torturous deaths determined by oppression, is good, in that good death enables transformation and renewal. Okay, we can go on, Danny, with the slides. And so I'm going to skip this to a section and the next one called Being Green. And the next slide, please. And in folklore, popular culture, the arts, literature, sacred texts, and eco-activism, I could have a lot of these slides. Greenness is everywhere. This virid panorama appears in distinct traditions from different places, and I'm not trying to collapse them all or to claim identical meanings, but I do think they share a symbolic rootedness in the greenness of life. Next slide, please. In art, Mother Nature is nearly always seen in and as green. Next one, please. Often with a dash of red. Green and red are complementary colors, as there is no trace of one in the other. They enact the reconciled opposites basic to the recipe for making life. This 1949 painting by Frida Kahlo, The Love Embrace of the Universe, shows an ambiguous green and brown universe as the enveloping background, in front of whom sits green-brown Mother Earth. Kahlo, in a red dress, sits on her lap and holds in her own lap a naked baby-like Diego Rivera. The dog, Senor Xolotl, suggesting the psychopomp, snoozes on the side. Green Mother Nature Earth also regularly shows up in activist graphics. Next one, please. As in this 1970s feminist button, Mother Nature is a lesbian, which shows no human figure, but deeply verdant trees and grass. Next slide, please. I'm skipping around a little, but in ancient Egypt, Wadjet, the green one, was the name of the protective serpent goddess of Lower Egypt, while, quote, to do green things was a euphemism for positive, life-producing behavior. The deities Hathor, Isis, and Osiris are all associated with green, and Isis is known as the creator of green things, queen of earth, and the green goddess whose green color is like unto the greenness of the earth. Egyptian founding feminist Nawal el-Saadawi titles her autobiography, A Daughter of Isis, and delights in her characteristic color, quote, my eyes are drawn to green, my lungs breathe it in. Green is converted in my lungs to oxygen. Next one, please. In European folk culture, green garb and a red cap and shoes are associated with fairies, elves, and leprechauns, who can sometimes be helpful, sometimes tricky. Fairies from the Blackdown Hills in Somerset, England, dance and sing, quote, green, 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 all a green, a dancing round the tree. Another song says, quote, in yonder greenwood, a green lady doth dwell. Her hair is green, and all green is her gown, and she calleth to all, draw near, come here. Writer Malidoma Patrice Sommet reports an encounter with a green woman dressed in black in a yila tree during an adolescent initiation ritual in Burkina Faso, his initiation ritual. This woman's skin color was, he says, green, light green. Still, her greenness had nothing to do with the color of her skin. She was green from the inside out, as if her body were filled with green fluid. I do not know how I knew this, but the green was the expression of immeasurable love, close quote. Africana spiritual traditions regularly feature trees as spiritual mothers. Trees come to symbolize almost every major mythical figure, especially Mother Nature, Mother Earth, as the tree of life. Sophia, the personification of wisdom in the Gnostic texts, is both a tree and, quote, the womb that gives shape to the all. In Ecclesiastes, Sophia announced, I have grown tall as a cedar, a cypress, a palm. Approach me, you who desire me, and take your fill of my fruits. This generosity, though, must be reciprocated, or the welcome mat can be withdrawn. Next one, please. The classic American children's story, next one, teaches a very different and damaging lesson about the cosmic tree. This picture book has an eye-catching green cover featuring a little white boy in a green t-shirt and red overalls, accepting a red apple, a gift from a green tree. As the boy matures, he becomes unloving, distant, and self-serving, taking terrible advantage of the clearly mother and feminine identified tree. The tree gives and gives and gives and never expects anything in return. By story's end, the boy, now man, has dismembered her, and all that remains is a saddened stump. At the end of his life, the boy returns and sits on the stump, making the tree again supposedly happy. But this terrible tale to me transmits ecocidal and apocalyptic myth. I'll skip around a little bit more to the next one, please, Danny. The green serpent in Genesis is another version of Mother. Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to say that in pop culture, representatives of Mother Nature Earth who refuse self-sacrifice are often villainized and made bad in some way, such as Batman's nemesis, Poison Ivy, the Wicked Witch of the West, and the Wizard of Oz. And I will take it now to the green serpent in Genesis is another version of Mother Nature made bad. Artist, color enthusiast, and gay rights activist Derek Jarman identifies the snake in the Garden of Eden as, quote, the green and ancient Venus, old enough to be God's granny. He also bemoans the colorless world imposed by the unpleasant new God. Surrealist Leonora Carrington's women's liberation poster from 1972, Mujeres Conciencia, is based on the Garden of Eden story, but reclaims the earthly paradise and the gift of knowledge bestowed by nature. Eve and Adam are two green Egyptian figures with the creative power of the green serpent rising between them, winding around the cosmic tree and offering that gift of green consciousness in the form of the apple. Next one, please. Alison Sayre celebrates the green serpentine power conjoined with the tree of life in her mixed media artwork, Mamba Mambo. A sculpted Mambo, a voodoo priestess, stands on a green pedestal placed atop a high green stool. Curling around her tree-like body is an enormous green mamba, a venomous South African cobra. Her red lipstick and matching high heels, Lisa Farrington writes, constitute the artist's code for the female element. A flag painted with two identical palm trees hangs behind the mambo. Like the Gnostic Sophia, the mambo is tall as the trees, with sun-like rays radiating from her body. Through this work, Sayre pays homage to voodoo's gender non-binary, unifying, and often green-toned deities, Damballa and Ida Wado, who are represented in voodoo art as double snakes coiled around a palm tree. All this greenness, from the pop to the profound, affirms Morton's assertion that humans just don't enjoy seeing the green, but need the green and must heed the green, for green is the color that shapes the possibilities of our lives. Okay, and I'll just end with a little bit from the very last bit of my book, which again invokes a dream. This is called Gather and Vote. In one of the dreams that guided me to this book, I encountered a rough black stone about a foot high, standing on the ground. In a flash, the stone animated, and reflecting my Irish heritage on my mother's side, there now stood a green-garbed and red-capped leprechaun. After we exchanged polite introductions, I asked him if I would be permitted a question. When he nodded yes, I asked what could be done in these dire times. He responded, quote, scattering is a problem. And he succinctly advised, quote, gather and vote. With that, he disappeared down a hole that had opened in the ground. These parting words were at first a puzzlement. Gathering is the basis of all social movements. It's also the principle underlying the basic oneness of life, which is what Mother Earth signifies. But I wasn't sure about voting, since I associated this only with the exercise of civic rights and responsibility at the polls. However important, that couldn't be the only message about voting. So I went to the dictionary and looked up vote and found that its first, if now rare, meanings were to vow to do something and to devote religiously. Vote derives from the Latin vovere, the same root as devotion. And to be devoted is to give reverence as well as a gift, and to be deeply attached to a person or a cause. To gather and vote in these dire times, then, is to get it together individually and with one's community to do something spiritually and politically, to be devoted, vowing love, allegiance, and attachment, including by returning gifts to the person and cause who is Mother Nature, Mother Earth, our planet, ourselves. Life is a gathering, a convocation, a ceremony of continually making life in concert with all being. Consider it then our most profound civic birthright and responsibility to recognize the larger Earth community of which we are a part, to share the common goods fairly, to treat all beings with respect, and to gather and vote for Mother Earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. How wonderful the continuity of green.
Mhm.
We now have a short time for questions or comments. If there are any, please type them into the Q&A. And I invite all the panelists to unmute and turn on their videos. Our first comment is from Janet McFadden, who says, I am deeply grateful to be listening to all of you, these tributes to mothers and mothering and nurturing. Thank you all. Teresa writes, thank you for invoking the works of Mexican and Latina writers and images. Arlie writes, thank you for this beautiful, happy Mother's Day to all mothers and nurturers of earth and life. Seems to be more thanks than questions, but that's good too, right? If there's anything that the panelists would like to say before we end, feel free.
Thank you, everybody. This was lovely to be in company with you. I feel really honored to have set aside this time of the day to hear all of what you had to share. And Kristen, I went to elementary school in that part of Connecticut and had a view out the living room window of the sleeping giant, but also spent a year living in Branford on the water when I was very young and watching the barges taking the stone away and thinking about where it went to. And so it was very evocative. Thank you.
Okay.
For sharing that. I really appreciate hearing your experience of what it meant to see the stone leaving this area. And I want to echo your comment that reading among such talented poets today has been truly humbling and an honor. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank all of you for being here. And I guess that ends our alternative Earth Day, Mother's Day reading for peace. Thank you so much for being with us.
I want to thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And curating this. It's really
Thank you, everyone. It was an honor to be here.
It was great to have you all. Thanks.
Thank you.